Welcome everyone to our 7th webinar. I hope I got that number right. Maybe it's 6, I'm not sure. I'm a sales guy. So welcome to our 7th webinar. It's been really a fun and interesting experience for us. We've had a lot of different formats that we've tried with single speakers and panel discussions coming from experts or coming from clients that are actually using their spaces, designers. And today we're going to try something a little bit different, and we're very excited about it. We are actually going to have you be part of the process this time. So we haven't done that before yet in our webinars, but we're excited to give it a try. So I'm Michael Henningsen. I'm the Director of Global Accounts for HNI, and I will be the man behind the curtain running the technology today. So be nice to me if I don't get it right. We have a couple people on our team I want to introduce. I was going to introduce Neil, but I'll introduce him last. Pam Keefe is on the call as well today, and Raul Aurora is as well. And they will both have a role when we get into the breakout rooms and sort of helping sort of navigate those discussions. So you'll see them kind of pop around and throughout the session. Pam is our Vice President of Sales for HNI Corporation. She's based in Singapore. Pam's been with us, I think 1 year less than me. So 5 years, 6 years?
Yeah, 5 years.
Yep, 5 years. And Pam has a long history. A lot of you probably know Pam. Pam has been in our industry for many years, and in Asia for about, I think 10 or 11 years now. Wonderful, adding a lot of value to our organization and the industry. We really love working with Pam. But she'll be, again, helping us out with the breakout rooms, et cetera, today. Raul Aurora is our director, our global account manager based in India. He's based in Bangalore. So Raul has been wonderful on these webinars, helping getting them organized on the India side and moderating, helping moderate them as well. Raul is responsible for all of our global account business in India. So Raul and I work together quite a lot. So it's a lot of fun working with these guys on these webinars. So the guy that's going to bring us through the session today, and we're really, really excited to have him. We've been kind of chasing him to help us do one of these, and we're really excited. He finally said yes. And so Neil Sultan, who some of you probably know, is the founding and managing director for ChangeWork, which is an independent strategy and change management consultancy, and he's based in Singapore. Neil's a teacher, a writer, a public speaker on the subject of workplace, and he's particularly interested in helping clients manage spatial, psychological, technological dimensions of the workplace. And this next part I've experienced personally working with Neil on a project. His approach is founded on data analytics to inform design and strategy decisions, running in parallel with business engagement to support strategic decision-making. Using this understanding, he can create more effective and inspiring environments which meet organizations' objectives. His experience of business outside of the world and workplace and design also enables him to connect in a very unique way with clients and designers alike to drive positive business and spatial outcomes for everyone. So Neil's been in Singapore, living in Singapore since 2008, but he actually doesn't stay in Singapore very much. He does a lot of projects globally, including Singapore, Bangkok, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Beijing, Seoul, Taipei, New York, Toronto, Nairobi, Sydney, London. I don't know about this year, Neil, if you're traveling around a lot this year. I know I'm not yet. But,
not at all.
Not at all. But Neil covers commercial workplace, retail, and tertiary education. So without further ado, actually, one more thing. I'm sorry. I want to bring up Raul briefly to give you a little housekeeping before he hands off to Neil.
Thank you, Michael. So as Michael said, this is a new format that we are trying. So, we just want to give you the general housekeeping guidelines that we are going to follow. So basically this whole session is about, we are going to have 4 breakout discussions in this complete session. And each of the attendees will be split into small groups where they can discuss the topic that obviously Neil will be sharing in some minutes. So each topic can be discussed for about 10 minutes. Each group needs to select a moderator who can sort of help run the discussion. The moderator will also briefly post and key ideas or words from the breakout session on the chat box. So the chat box, if you hover around on the screen on the bottom, you can see a icon to chat. So you can post your ideas or thoughts, whatever you're discussing as a group in the chat box. After 10 minutes, each group will be returning back to the main room. And that's where the moderators would be prompted by the host or Neil to report back whatever they have discussed or concluded as a group. After all these 4 breakout sessions, we are going to have an open session for questions and answers. And at the end, what we are going to do is we are going to keep some time for networking and informal discussions, where you can get along with other participants. The other 2 things, you're free to use your video cameras as and when you like, so you can see who are the other participants, just not the name, so you see their faces as well. And regarding the mics, so whenever you are in the main rooms, we request you to keep the mic or yourself on mute so that we can hear what the host is talking about. So these are the general guidelines. If you have any questions or any queries, you can always post it in the chat box and we will respond you back. So now I hand it over to Neil to kick it off.
Okay, Rahul, thank you very much indeed, and good afternoon and welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I hope you've had a good day so far, and let's see if we can have a stimulating end to the day. So Michael was saying at the beginning it's taken him ages to get me to do this, but I think anybody who knows me realizes that it's not a question of starting me talking, it's a question of making me stop. So frankly, he didn't have to try too hard. So we hope you're going to enjoy the format that we've chosen today. Just as an addition to what Rahul said, the story about going into all of the breakout rooms, that will be done automatically by the system. You don't need to think or worry or press any buttons. You'll automatically be taken into the breakout room, and then you'll automatically be put back into the main room after the 10 minutes is up for each of the 4 sessions. And now for the surprise. I'm hoping, and I'm very, very confident that each of you have got your phones or your laptops nearby. And what I'd like to do is just kick us off with an online voting session. So this is using an interactive voting system. It's called Mentimeter, and I'll just pop up the instructions on how to use that right now. It's only 3 questions that we're going to be asking just to get us moving, and let's just keep us all alive. So as I say, this is a system called Mentimeter, just to get a few thoughts before we go on to the webinar itself. So what I'd ask you to do is to reach for your laptop or your mobile and log on to the website www.menti.com. So after you access that via your browser, you're going to be prompted to enter a 6-digit code, and you'll see that coming up on the very next slide in just a moment. And once everyone's connected to the voting system, we'll begin the questions, and we'll be able to view the responses build up live on screen as you're going through the process of answering them. So there's going to be a couple of different formats of voting. Some will just be out of a choice of 5 options, choose one. And you'll only be able to choose one. It won't be easy, but I'm afraid one is going to be the only option. And there's going to be another format, which is called a word cloud. And in this particular format, what you'll be able to do is be able to enter 5 words as your response to the question that's asked at the top of the screen. And what will happen is that all of the words that you enter and all of the words that are entered in the whole of the community on the webinar will show up live on screen. So hopefully that will be visually quite interesting to see some of the things that we're all thinking about before we go into the breakout session. So that'll just make sure you're alive and well and thinking as we progress through the course of the session today. So I hope that's all clear. Let me just click over to the next slide. So www.menti.com. So you should be reaching for that now and logging on. And across the top and in the middle is it's in fact a 7-digit code in this particular case, which you can enter. And then when you've keyed that code in, you'll see a heart. And if you're looking at my screen now, down at the bottom here, we've already had 4. Now it's 5 people who've already connected. So let's get that done as quickly as we can so that we can have as many people connected to the system as possible. So for anybody who's joining a little bit later, have a look at the top of the screen, log on to www.menti.com and then key in the 7-digit code and press the heart symbol. We've got 14 logged in so far. Perhaps Michael or Rahul, if you could perhaps let me know in the chat box how many people we have at the moment, and then I can know when to proceed. There's going to be one test question that I run right at the beginning. So that will be one about food. Living in Singapore, I can only ever talk about food, of course, because that is the subject closest to everyone's hearts. And I can see the numbers of people rising. We're almost at the point where we have everybody on the system. So my wife, who's Singaporean, told me that she knew I'd become Singaporean when I was sitting down having one meal and starting to think about what to be eating in the next meal that would be following later on in the evening. That's how you can tell a Singaporean. We are somewhat obsessed with our food. Okay, so we've had a good number of people connected. So let's move on to the very, very first question. This is going to be a voting question. Let's just swap the slide over. Now, here we go. What is the most popular food in the UK, the country that I used to call home? Let's see how much you know. So look on your phone, choose the option that you think is correct. Oh, we've got two very, very strong candidates. You seem to be ignoring 3 out of the 5. Is that the right thing? Now we have almost everything covered. Interesting series of votes here. We've got 16 votes so far. A few more to come in. Each one of the food varieties is actually chosen now. That's more like it. Roast beef is getting a couple of last-minute votes there. And now fish and chips is on the rise. Interesting. Spaghetti bolognese and pizza. Still only 1 vote each. Fish and chips is getting lots of love. Let's have a few more. And it's going to fish and chips at the moment. Interesting. I wonder what the real answer will be. Let's just wait for a couple of minutes, a couple of seconds, a couple more votes to come in. So let's go ahead with the correct answer, which is chicken tikka masala. There's more units of chicken tikka masala shipped in the UK than there are fish and chips, which used to be the most popular food. So there we go. You've at least learned something new during the course of the session. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Now, this is going to be hard for you. Look at these 6 options. Which one of these, out of these 6, what was the most difficult aspect about working from home during the pandemic? You can only choose one. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see if the votes that we achieve here are close to some of the other research that we did. Equal split here at the moment. Oh, this is interesting. You poor people working longer hours. My sympathies. Let's have a little look. That's interesting. Some interesting results coming up here. So unsurprisingly, there's no correct answer on here. It's whatever. And of course, the answer for you may be not included in these 6, but these were the 6 most significant areas when we did some research at the beginning of the lockdown, or the circuit breaker, as it was described in Singapore. Going back to April, it seems such a long time ago. Okay, so working longer hours. This does seem to have been the disease of the additional disease, as well as the virus. I have talked to a lot of clients, and the reason why the amount of working hours is longer, when you go to the office, you see someone at the coffee machine, and it's very easy to have a 5 or a 10-minute conversation about a particular topic, an ad hoc, informal kind of conversation. And lots of corporate clients have told me that those ad hoc conversations can't happen. So what's happening now is people are scheduling 30-minute calls to deal with a 10-minute conversation. That seems to have been happening a great deal, which made me wonder, why is it in these days that we just don't pick up the phone and call people anymore? When I started work back in 1979, that's all we could do. None of the options. We seem a little bit shy about just picking up the phone and having a quick conversation. We can always just let the call go, but that doesn't seem to be happening from a behavioral perspective. More on that topic a little bit later. So second most significant, and perhaps you need to be talking to Rahul, Michael and Pam after the call, uncomfortable working spaces. That was certainly a challenge. Most people didn't have the experience of working at home. In fact, in our research, copy of which is available if you're interested afterwards, 57% of people in Singapore had never worked from home previously. So if you've never worked from home, it's unlikely that your space would be set up to be able to work from home in a comfortable and ergonomic position. So that was a challenge for many people right at the beginning, other than some of the other challenges of lots of distractions from family members, children doing homeschooling and so on. So thanks very much for that. So I think we just have one more question to go. Let me just flip on to the next one. Now, this is the word cloud. So on your phone now, you've got the opportunity to have 5 entries. Choose 5 different words to express what you missed the most about being in the office. And the more people say the same word, the bigger that word will be as we progress through the building up of the word cloud. Everybody's got up to 5 entries. It can just be 1, 2, or 3, as you wish. And for those people just joining the call, there's a few people just coming in from the waiting room. If you take a look at the top of the screen, it tells you a website that you can log on to, and you'll be prompted to enter the 7-digit code that's shown at the top of the screen. So if you've just joined us, this is your chance to participate in the last of these sessions. Some interesting questions, including coffee. It's funny how when I do my workshop engagement sessions, one of the things people want the most is coffee, but not just coffee. Free coffee is the very, very common thing that people are asking for. Very interesting, isn't it, that this is a theme here where we're seeing a great deal about conversations and collaboration and so this is a really, really interesting list. Social collaboration as well, brainstorming, casual conversations. And I think it's really, really interesting. And perhaps we will talk about this a little bit later on. Not all meetings are the same. There's different styles of meetings that require different types of places. Not everything has to be in a bookable meeting room. Some coffee kind of spaces are really, really interesting and very relaxed, comfortable place where you can have meetings. So having this story about different styles of meeting space becomes interesting. And we can see down here having different spaces to work. And I think a lot of people really miss some of the chit chat, the social engagement. And in fact, the research that we did, the most common reason that people missed about being in the office was communication and collaboration. And then the second most important topic was the social interactions between colleagues. Life isn't all about work. And of course, you need that social cohesion with the people that you're working with in your working environment. And it's only so far that we can go on tools such as Zoom or Teams or WebEx or whichever of the other many different types of technology that you can be using. So we can see here there's a real story about human connection, and it's really interesting to see this. We do, as an industry, tend to get quite caught up in the idea of workplace being a very technical story, but in fact, it's always been about people. It'll always be about people. So this whole desire to be with colleagues, to work and react and work in a more intuitive way, I think is a super interesting topic. So we can see those words in a larger font, which are the ones that have been repeated the most by all of you who've provided the inputs. And coffee does seem to be the largest. I strongly recommend you get a good coffee machine at home. It makes all the difference. I spent a fortune on a coffee machine and I don't regret it for a moment. It's lovely to have the smell of freshly ground coffee just to keep you going through the course of the day. So that's excellent. Thanks so much for doing all of that. By the way, the word cloud that we've built up here and the other voting, those will be available for you. We can circulate those to you at the end of the session if you would like to take those as a takeaway. So thanks all to each of you for participating in that section. Okay, so before we go into the breakout sessions, a couple of talking points. For me as a workplace person, I actually think the workplace has been quite stagnant for many years. Now, of course, this depends by country. There's different drivers in every location. That's certainly the case. And it's interesting that we keep on seeking out the next trend where, frankly, I don't think we've adopted all of the things that have been available to us for many years correctly yet. So I'm really, really interested in hearing from you a little bit later about why that has been. If you think about workplace, you need to connect 4 different topic areas. We need to think about people and place and technology and process. And I think corporations in general terms have been relatively slow to adopt some of the really interesting changes that are possible in each of those 4 areas. The potential for change has been available to us for many decades, but yet we're not quite adopting. But now the pandemic has absolutely changed everything. We've been forced into a situation where we've had to work in a way that many, many people didn't think was possible. I've used the statistic already. 57% of people in Singapore had never worked at home for any length of time. In the survey as a whole, across the whole of Asia, 49% of people had never worked at home. So this was really quite a shock for the system. And for me, it's been really, really interesting because in my face-to-face interactions with clients before the pandemic hit us, so many people would say, oh, I can only come to the office. It's not possible for me to work. And yet, here we are at the beginning of September, and it's amazing what we have been able to accomplish during these difficult few months. The question is, what are we going to do next? It's clear to all of us, and we've seen some hints of that in some of the things that you've said, that at the beginning of the lockdown or the circuit breaker, things were challenging, dealing with homeschooling, disturbances, if you live in Hong Kong, that's been really tough. People tend to live in smaller apartments, perhaps with extended members of the family. So it's really, really quite difficult to manage a productive working life at the same time as dealing 24/7 with everybody who may be occupying the same space. And for managers as well, things were very, very difficult. But it's not just managers, it's staff as well. Many managers have had a great deal of difficulty in managing people when they can't see them. Managers are quite used to seeing their staff laid out in front of them, and it's easy to go to a person and ask them to do something. It's easy to check how somebody's getting on. And for lots of managers, that's proven to be very, very difficult managing that kind of story virtually over Zoom calls or audio calls. It's been very interesting to me to see how few people on a video call on Zoom or WebEx or Teams don't switch on the camera. It's amazing. I find it quite surprising in many ways. And it seems to be a very, very strong bias towards Westerners who are quite happy to put the camera on. And to a degree, that's less true of people in Asia. People are a little bit more shy, perhaps. People don't want you to see what their home looks like. I'm not sure what that story is there. Perhaps that will come out a little bit later on. But we've really got to be able to use the tools at our disposal to make sure that we can get something of a replication of a face-to-face interaction. So difficult for managers to manage, and it's also been difficult for staff to manage upwards, to be able to be performing and delivering and being seen to be there, always on, always connected, working longer hours. There's a lot of guilt trips that have been experienced during the last 4 months. So there's lots of things that we absolutely haven't got right at the moment that we need to be thinking about. But I think as the lockdown, the circuit breaker continued, things did get a little bit easier once children went back to school and people did become used to how work can be, perhaps have upgraded their Wi-Fi, perhaps they bought an extra monitor, or perhaps even their company has provided them with an additional monitor to work a little bit more effectively. And maybe even some of you have actually bought a new coffee machine as well to keep yourself going. So what's interesting to me is that this experience of the last few months, we can't unlearn it. This is forever in our minds, and you can rest assured that the C-suites in all of the companies that you work for, all of the companies that I've been talking to, have actually picked up on this. So we're heading for what's next. I don't like saying the new normal because I never quite knew what normal was before. But I think what's next is a better way of describing what it is that we have to do, and it carries a little bit less baggage. The normal thing is kind of a strange phrase from my perspective. So that what's next is something that I'd like to be exploring during the course of the breakout sessions. So let me just do a quick introduction to what it is that we want to do. So in just a moment, you're going to be shifted into some breakout groups. You'll be split relatively equally, and you'll be moved into the breakout rooms. And what we're going to be doing in the 4 different sessions, session 1 is a little bit of reflection. Session 2 will be about your learning. Session 3 will be a conversation between yourselves about performance. And then section 4, perhaps the most important, is what are you actually going to do with the knowledge that you've gained through these relatively challenging times? What are the positive things that we can take? And I think it's really good to be having a conversation that's forward-looking. I've been on quite a few webinars where we've been looking backwards. Oh, everything was so difficult. I couldn't do this. It was difficult to do that. What I'm looking for today is a conversation that's about forward-looking action. What have we learned that's been really positive, and what can we do going forward? So just ahead of going into the breakout session, the first one, as I mentioned, is going to be the reflection. And these are some ideas for the topics that I'd like you to be having a little think about. We've already described that the government enforcement of working from home was difficult. Thinking quite particularly about technology, lots of the technologies have been available for years. I did my first video call in 1996. It was a very regular thing for me then. So why is it that we haven't been using these technologies in the days pre-COVID? It seems to me very, very strange. We've been able to work in a more flexible way, and yet we haven't. So have a little conversation amongst your groups. What have been the barriers? What's prevented us from using some of the technologies? I'm interested in that as a topic, but if there's anything else that you would like to think of as you reflect, then please do that. So enjoy the conversation. I'll see you back in about 10 minutes. And what we'll do is go and talk to a couple of the different groups. We can't hear back from every group, but I'll just pick out a couple of groups at random, and perhaps you can give us a little bit of feedback. So into the first breakout room you go. Michael, Rahul.
I think it's not working.
So there's no audio.
Hello, everyone. My apologies. I think we got that wrong. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry about that. That was a little wonky. And I think some of the people left some of the rooms prematurely. So I think that happened as well. So we're learning, but from the group I was in, there was some really great discussion. So I was really happy about it. And I actually put a couple notes in the chat already. So everyone else is welcome to do that. Neil, we can't hear you.
Okay, so can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, and it says I'm screen sharing. Can you actually see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do a conversation at the end and just grab some feedback. So let's have a little quick look at the second topic, which is about learning. So there's a little bit of overlap between the first and the second one. I'm really interested in what are now the big learning topics for both you, that could be you personally, and your organization. We've already heard some of the challenges that people have experienced. Interestingly, on the technology theme, the network was the problem. The quality of Wi-Fi, the speed of Wi-Fi, that seemed to be a particular challenge for many, making some of the collaboration quite difficult. But so what are the big learning topics for the organization? And also, how did you actually overcome some of the challenges you experienced? So let's see if we can jump into another breakout room and hear what you all have to say on that. If we can dive into the rooms, Michael.
Yes. Are we still in the main chat or in the rooms?
We're still in the main chat at the moment.
Okay, let's try this again. Okay, I think that time was a little bit better.
Yes, we seem to get the time right there. It doesn't seem quite long enough to have a conversation though, but
Yeah.
I think what we may do then in that case is I may actually just go straight on to the last one so that
Okay.
we can have a little bit of time to review. I'm conscious of the time that we've scheduled. So let's just go on to the fourth one, which is going to be about action. So let me just quickly share my screen. That should be coming up there. Hopefully you can see that now. And the fourth topic is going to be action. So the topics I'm interested to hear from you all now are, if you had the time all over again, and of course we don't hope that happens, obviously not, but with the benefit of hindsight, what would you do differently? And what permanent changes will you or your company adopt based on what you've learned during this time? So those two questions I think are quite interesting to be thinking about as we think about going forward. So let's jump into the groups for the final 10 minutes and we'll just try and do some wrap up after that. Okay, we seem to be back. It's amazing how quickly 10
Yeah.
minutes goes. Goodness me, that was quite surprising. I hadn't really expected that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Michael, could you please let it go for a minute more so we can come?
Well, we do have time to continue a conversation once we finish up. So if anyone is able to stay on a little bit longer, I'll stay and we can just ask each other anything we like. So let's just quickly pop up onto the closing slides. I'll just grab some summaries that I heard from our group. Michael, if you could pop up the chat box with any other information, that would be super helpful. So let me just have a quick run through from the beginning. Some of the things that our group talked about at the beginning was technology. Technology seemed to be really frustrating. Mobile network or Wi-Fi network, that was quite tough. The learning one was quite interesting. Some really good conversations about what it's like to present online and how people who are accomplished presenters face to face a little bit more nervous and having to learn some new skills when we're presenting virtually. So that was interesting. And also the story of learning new applications. You know, it's impossible to deal with China unless you have WeChat. You just can't do it. And we have Google Meet and we have Teams and we have Zoom, and so the list goes on. Learning all of these different technologies was quite interesting. And one of the group actually mentioned our personal condition, fitness, and I was quite proud. I'm one of the few people maybe who actually lost weight during the lockdown, so that was quite good going. I know some of you, I'm connected to you on Facebook, and I know many of you were doing even more fitness than normal, so good for you for doing that. Time management was something of a challenge for everyone. And then at the end, the very last section, we were talking about ergonomics, this whole story of equipping ourselves with the right furniture to look after ourselves, a desk of the right height, a chair that's properly adjustable so that you can work comfortably, and a little bit on the technology story as well there. And quite an interesting part of the conversation was whether or not companies are sponsoring the provision of some of that equipment. So I think that's quite an intriguing topic area. But overall, and at the end we had, and Josephine I think mentioned some stories that they're doing to retain team morale. And she was saying that morale is actually better in here because that their groups have actually been getting together and talking about more personal aspects. So doing a little coffee session where you do your project updates, but you tell your colleagues perhaps something that they didn't know about you previously. So adding a little bit of personal side of lives, not too personal, I'm quite sure, but at least giving your colleagues a little bit more of an insight on who you are and what excites you and motivates you. So a very, very human story evolving as we were going through the course of the session there. So let me just stop sharing just briefly. Does anybody have anything in the chat that was particularly significant to them? If you drop that into the chat box, I'll be very happy to capture some of those things.
Well, what I will say, Neil, is we noticed that some of the same themes that you brought came up in our conversation as well. So there was some consistent, the online collaboration we were talking about. Juanito was talking about what he's doing in the Philippines on that. We were talking about, what was the other one that you just mentioned? Online collaboration tools. We were talking about ergonomics. That was the other one too, ergonomics at home. So there were some of the same themes that were coming up, but Amit brought up a really important one that JLL is really thinking a lot about, and that is the psychological safety and how to make people feel safe coming to the workplace. Making sure those policies are clear for the things that are seen, but also the things that are not seen at the same time. Yeah,
I think that's a super interesting point. I've done a little bit of writing on that myself over the last couple of months, because what we seem to have been obsessed with is, when are we going back? When are we going back? What's the date? When can we get back to normal? It's very, very timeline driven. And I'm really interested in the dynamic of, yes, of course, we want to get back to the office as soon as we can. I think the question that's most important is, how do we feel about going back? How do we build up what I described as the circle of trust? And I think, so for me, that's an interesting concept. So the circle of trust, what I mean by that is that, so my wife and I, we know we can trust each other. Yeah, I'm sure you'll be all relieved to hear that. But part of that is because whenever the doorbell rings and there's yet another online delivery, one of us takes the delivery, we're wearing a mask, and then as we unpack the external packaging, dispose of that, we immediately go and wash our hands, and then we deal with whatever it is that's been arrived. So we see each other doing that, so we trust each other implicitly from that perspective. Just think about going back to the office. All of these strangers who you call your colleagues, you don't quite know what their behaviors are. And we get into some fairly delicate matters of personal hygiene and personal responsibility. So I think this is a really interesting topic that as we adjust to getting back to the office, we need to be taking care not just of the things that our employers are duty bound to do to create a safe environment, but our own personal responsibilities to be doing the right thing, to be looking after our own personal hygiene. I think that's an enormously important area. I think the other thing to extend from that, this psychological safety story, again, massively important. Very interesting to me that the whole topic of mindfulness and mental well-being and mental health, it's a difficult subject in Asia. It's not talked about that openly, and I think it's a really, really important one. We do have to learn how to take care of ourselves and manage our own time. And I hear lots and lots of people say, I'm so stressed, I'm so stressed. I'm not sure everyone means that. Sometimes stress equals busy, but for some people, they are genuinely stressed about this situation. And it's really troublesome, particularly if you're more introverted by nature than someone like me who's a little bit more of an extrovert. So I think this spectrum of different personality types, I think, is a really, really interesting area that managers and employers alike need to be thinking about a little bit more carefully. It's a massively important topic, and it makes a huge difference to our lives. And the more we are able to have those conversations, we take then a little bit of the stigma away of a conversation like that. So I think that's been really, really interesting inputs. Okay, I think we're drawing close to the end of our time. Let me just quickly hand back to either Pam or Michael, just perhaps to do a little bit of a wrap up. I will be remaining online. I'm sure I'll be seen with a glass of wine quite shortly. So happy to hang around and chat for as long, well, almost as long, up to dinner time, of course, whenever that is. So certainly from my side, thanks so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed some of the inputs that you've provided. It's been great to see some old friends and some new ones. So thank you all for your time. And I hope to see you in a face-to-face meeting at some point, but if not, perhaps in a virtual meeting in the not too distant future. So thank you all for joining.
Yeah, and I think thank you all again for joining as well. You're welcome to stay. We'll continue the discussion for a few more minutes here. Turn on your camera and join the conversation. We'd love to have you. But again, thank you so much. I was really excited. It was a little clunky at times, but I was excited for the discussions. So we really appreciate you all participating, sharing, and so we could learn more about how to present this kind of content to you, but also to share information. And hopefully you saw a few new faces that you wouldn't have seen otherwise. And you can do that some more by staying with us. I will remind you that Neil, if you can advance, we do have some additional references, resources available on allsteeloffice.com. So there's a lot of white papers, some of which are talking about some of these topics. So that's available. You can also talk to Pam, Raul, or myself at any time. Contact us to learn more about what we can do. We have actually, along with partners like Neil and with our own internal team, have also offered some of these webinar content to clients to a private group as well. So if you're interested in that, please do let us know if you're interested in that as well. So, and I do have, for those of you who are still here, if you wouldn't mind answering a couple of questions for us. So the first question is, did you enjoy this webinar format with the breakout rooms? And the second was just a question we always like to ask and find out is, what time of day is good for you to do these sessions? And since we have both India and Southeast Asia groups on this call today, I'm sure the answers will be, a little bit different, but it's good to know. Oh, okay. Well,
time as well. That's good to see. I'm happy that people want to discuss during lunch. I think that's
strange how nobody wants the morning, though.
Yeah. Maybe our mornings are getting late these days. So.
Well, maybe so.
Yeah.
So we seem to have quite a good vote for the breakout rooms. I think on reflection, I think we could probably do with having a little bit more time to talk about the topic. So I think that's something that we can learn there. It's always quite challenging to have 5 or 6 people talking in just a 10-minute period. So.
Well, but I was in one couple breakout rooms where, well, one more than the other, where people were shy to talk. And at first I was the only one with my camera on, and nobody wanted to talk. And then someone from my company joined. So she was able to kind of help a little bit, get that going. And we had to literally call on people. So, some are, maybe it's easier for some than it is for others.
Hey, everyone I'm going to unmute. So people feel free to talk. Anybody want to give any feedback or talk about anything, the format or the content? Feel free. I see we still have about 15 people in the chat.
We have the hardcore of people. Fantastic. And now the cameras come on. Fantastic.
Yay, Kunal. Good for you.
It has been interesting for me to see the difference in people who will put the camera on and who won't, literally depending where they come from. That was quite intriguing, really.
It could be people that weren't expecting it either today.
There you
go.
And you also knew that the business development people they turn the camera on right away.
Yes.
Well, I think that there was a $64 million question, Neil, which was, I don't know if Rajendra is still in the call, but it was about work from home. Yeah. And is this a temporary trend that will go away after COVID elimination, or future accepted system of work?
Oh, I think it's here to stay. So let me just give you some reasons for that. I'm actually, for a few very large clients, just modeling the impact of this. So I think that the idea of coming to an office to sit side by side with another 1,000 people and just being on back-to-back calls all day, or just doing solo tasks, doesn't make any sense. If you've got a reasonable place to work at home, then why wouldn't you just stay there and do that? So I think what a lot of people are now looking at is really redefining what work is and what the reasons are to go for the office. And fundamentally, that's about collaboration. So you don't only go to the office to meet, because clearly there's a mix of solo and group activities that you do. But I think we're going to see a change in the proportions of how spaces are laid out. It's not uncommon to see floor plates with 70% of space allocated to desks and 30% of space allocated to meeting rooms. In a lot of cases, it's worse than that. And recognizing that 3/4 of your space is only used half of the time, you're already wasting lots of real estate anyway. So post-COVID, I think work from home is here to stay. Actually, I'd prefer it to be work from anywhere, of which home becomes a part. So what I think we'll see is a decrease in the space for solo working. People will do more of that at home, and an increase in the amount of space available for collaboration. And that starts to mean that we can have less real estate to accommodate the same number of people. And the numbers are really, really quite interesting on that. And I've got 4 live conversations at the moment with CEOs, and we're really re-examining that. And I think the thing for me that's best about this is that this is not about real estate savings. It's actually about creating places that are really effective for people to go to and work, so that you can have the social cohesion, you can have the appropriate kinds of meetings, brainstorming, creative kinds of sessions. And I think, the more that we can do of that, the better. So I think the world of real estate, it's going to change. Things will never be the same again.
Any other comments, thoughts?
So just to give you some clues on those numbers, when you model these things, it's up to 20%, and in some cases a little bit more, less real estate if you start to redefine work and rethink the kind of spaces that you have. Quite intriguing. Big numbers. Michael, you keep going upside down.
I was trying to show this, but it's unfortunately it's mirror image.
Yeah, it's okay. We can see it now. It looks quite cute.
So what were your comment? What were your thoughts on this?
Mine?
Yeah.
A fairly unsurprising set of results, really, to be honest. It's a very, very good correlation with all of the things that we found out in our own research that we ran at the beginning of the pandemic and the lockdown. There's this desire for collaboration and how to interact, and it at the beginning it was hard for people to focus and concentrate. So it's a wholly unsurprising list, frankly.
Yeah.
It's quite a nice technique to use this. I use this a lot in all of my workshops with clients. So I do this at the beginning of sessions. And what I do is I get a group of senior execs and I ask them the questions. And then I ask middle managers and staff the same question so that we can compare the responses. That's always good fun. All these managers who think they know how work is done and how little they know.
Well, and I think what is as important as what's on that list is what's not on that list.
As well.
Right? So,
yeah, absolutely.
So I think, trying to see if there's any other big pen left I can see. If there were any other big thoughts that came through.
It was interesting that the technology stuff, people clearly having lots and lots of problems with network speed. Alex is still up on the call at the moment, and he was the first to raise that topic. It's really quite tough, particularly if you're in an apartment building, and you've got the same amount of bandwidth coming to your apartment building pre-COVID as you do during COVID, and your apartment block is full of more people for longer doing more. So that's clearly problematic. Just laws of physics tell you that that's going to be something of a problem. So Singapore, we're quite lucky. I've got a gigabyte coming to my front door. So I frankly haven't noticed any difference. And I'm literally only 1 meter from my router. I'm sure that's frying my brains. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, it's interesting too. That's right, because Singapore has invested in the fiber in almost every residential building. In fact, it was in residential before it was in all the commercial.
Yes, yes.
Which was interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Makes a huge difference as well when you don't have to think of latency and this horrible feeling of calls breaking up and the image freezing. It's really very, very frustrating indeed. And then we have, and you've probably seen this on LinkedIn, the games of bingo that people do. So all of the word bingo. So as soon as anyone gets on a Zoom call, they come off mute and everyone says, "Can you hear me? Can you see my screen?" So, but at least we're laughing about those things now. So that's been quite amusing, really.
All right. Anyone else have anything they want to talk about? I think we're down to the true believers and the people that walked away from their Zoom window.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I noticed that in the breakout rooms, there were a few people that never accepted to go into the room because they were still on the call.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, it was real interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I think thanks everyone again. And Neil, I mean, I think we learned a lot about the durations, the cadence and everything. So I think this was great.
Yeah, it's about experimentation really, and we've all got to just get in and get involved and try these things, and there's a difference. So that's an interesting point for me, is the the nature of this interaction with a bunch of relative strangers, most of us have never met each other, is one form of interaction, whereas a one-to-one with your boss is entirely different, and a brainstorm session with your colleagues is entirely different, and yet we're using the same laptop and same camera to deal with it. So I think a lot of this gets wrapped up in a big behavioral story. So there's a lot that we have to learn, managers in particular, managing people who they can't see, that's really quite a big area. And then what is it that you as a member of staff need to do to help your manager know what's going on and keep them updated? So this whole story is an area that I'm going to be developing some content on over the coming months.
I think it was also interesting, the issue of I was going to try to show it right now, but the online collaboration. So, because I'm working on the Cornet annual event this year, I'm the Josephine, who you probably met in one of the rooms, is the other chair, and then Anna is our boss, so to speak.
Yes.
She was also in the group today. But let me tell you, in the very beginning, the online collaboration whiteboarding tool, we happened to choose Mural, was really invaluable because we were able to visualize things in very similar way than we would have done on the whiteboard with Post-it notes and markers in the office. So it was very familiar to people. People were talking. People felt like they knew kind of how the system worked.
Yeah.
Because we tried to mirror it in that way, and that really kickstarted it. Now what's interesting is we forgot about how great a tool it was, and we kind of drifted away from it, and we probably shouldn't have, right?
Yes.
But so I think those are things that we need to kind of pay very close attention, because we can get into these habits that maybe aren't taking us where we need to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Microsoft have got a fairly reasonable whiteboard app as well that you can use on iPads. That's quite good if you connect that up to your call as well. That because interesting, isn't it? In a world of high technology, the one thing lots of people ask for in meeting rooms is whiteboards. We just want to go to a board and draw. So that's where I think the iPad or any other touch device that you may be using, you may have a laptop with a touchscreen, whatever the technology or brand happens to be, doesn't matter particularly. But this simple act of drawing and being able to see a line appearing on screen, I think is a really, really important thing. Keeps the humanity as well. Well,
the great thing too is you don't have to erase the whiteboard. You can keep it.
Yes.
Which was great.
and not have to take a photograph of it and lose the photograph.
Exactly. I think Steve wasn't on this call, but my favorite whiteboard assassin, Steve Louie, helped us out last year, and he's a master at ideation and visualization on the whiteboard. And we were kind of inspired by that. And so that was great. Like I said, Juanito from Philippines, he's a designer, was on our call earlier, and he was talking about how they really had to do that because they were having difficulty with the client and them understanding what the other was trying to say and what they were. They needed something to kind of bridge that gap, that communication gap.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because there's if you look at the people just here right now, you know, we're all from different countries. Many of you are from countries where English may not and probably isn't the first language. So most of you are masters at speaking in a second language, and that's quite challenging as well. And that's when just the ability to draw something transcends words. So I think that's interesting to be, you know, being able to be effective and quickly effective across cultural barriers. I think that makes a real difference as well, because drawing is the same for everybody except me, because I simply can't do it.
Okay, well, I know I'm gonna have to sign off myself, and so I guess unless anyone else wants to stay around and talk, I'm going to shove off. Anyone else?
Okay. Well, thanks to all of you who've stayed and just hung out for the last few minutes. That was great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Neil. Appreciate it. And we can we'll do a download later.
Sure.
Okay.
Take care, everyone who's still on the call. Stay safe out there. It's not over yet.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye.